Welcome to Touched by Grace. I'm here with my friend Christa Landon, and we're going to spend some time talking about how the Lord has broke into your world and touched your life with the goodness of Jesus. And it's such a life-changing thing to have the Lord, even working through all the circumstances of our life where He brings us to this place of at times brokenness, a place of that we just have to turn to Him, like there's no other way to turn. And so I want to hear your story about that. And so tell me about what life was like for Christa growing up. Did you grow up here in Idaho Falls?
Yeah, I was born in Idaho Falls, and we lived in Idaho Falls until I was in second grade. Then we moved to Shelley. And that was a big change because it's a very LDS community that we moved into, and we weren't LDS.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys have any connection spiritually or religiously, or just kind of good Idaho boys, family type?
My parents were raised LDS, and they didn't raise us any certain way.
But they both grew up LDS, and then were non-active, kind of participating.
Right.
And so what was life like? In the family, if they're not, walking with the Lord, what life look like in your mom and dad's life?
Well, both my parents were drug addicts. They were both on meth.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the environment. They were good parents as far as, they had a house for us to live in, and, we had food in our cupboards and stuff like that. So
they were functioning
addicts.
Yeah. So they held a job down, both mom and dad, or just dad? Or
yeah, my mom worked from home a lot of years, and she was always working. She always had some kind of work to do. So, they provided for their family in that aspect.
And so what did your dad do for work?
He is a sheet metal worker.
Mm-hmm. And so what was the earliest age that you discovered that? Was it from, you don't remember a time that they weren't kind of functioning in meth, or when was the awareness to you?
I noticed things changed when we moved out to Shelley. Mm-hmm. I think that's when it got worse. Mm. My parents both kind of lived in their own worlds, My dad's was out in his garage, and I would hardly ever see him. The only interaction I had with him was him yelling at me about something. Mm-hmm. I don't think I ever actually had a conversation with him, a real conversation, like person to person, until after he got saved.
Really?
Yeah. And my mom would just kind of lock herself in her room and work, and just didn't see him much unless you were in trouble,
Mm-hmm. So you get brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have two brothers.
Two brothers. Both older? You're the youngest?
Yeah, I'm the baby of the family.
Okay. And so, did you go to high school in Shelley and stayed, all the way through school?
So, we'd moved there in second grade, and we went there until, I think it was 8th grade, like almost through the end of my 8th grade year. And that's when my parents got divorced. My mom got sober and got away from the drugs, and my dad was still living in that lifestyle. And, you can imagine what kind of tension that would create in a relationship if somebody's trying to be sober and trying to get away from all that, Yeah. And so anyways, they ended up divorcing, and my mom moved to Idaho Falls, and me and my second oldest brother moved with her. My oldest brother stayed with my dad. And we lived in a trailer. My mom worked. She was working and just trying to stay sober, and not trying, she was staying sober. And my dad was still just, living his life, and he was very angry about the whole thing. He was angry at my mom for leaving, and he was angry at me and my brother for moving with her. So, anyways, my dad ended up getting involved with this woman who turned out to be a CIA informant. And so he got arrested for a large quantity of meth, and
he was dealing.
He wasn't dealing, I don't think. He just, he
had it.
Had a lot.
He had a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
From what I understand, this informant came into his life and set up this deal for a huge amount, and that's why he had so much. I don't know. I guess
So he
that's
got
kind of
busted and
neither
went
here
to
nor there.
prison.
Yeah, so he got arrested for that and went to prison. So he was in prison for 3 years and then on parole after that.
And how old were you when he got busted?
13 or 14, I think. And then it took a year for all the sentencing and stuff. So I was 15 when he went to prison.
How'd that affect you? I mean, just the thought, because you knew the lifestyle of the meth and the drugs was there, so it wouldn't have been a big shock to get busted for it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of time where me and my dad just didn't talk. After, I mean, because we'd never actually had a conversation. I didn't like him. I thought he hated me, you know. I thought both my parents hated me, actually. And so I just kept a distance from him, didn't talk to him after we moved out, you know, for a while. And then, you know, when he found out that I did drugs too, I started doing drugs when I was 13. And when he found that out, then we would get high together, you know.
You started doing meth at 13? Or
Yeah, I was
the other
doing
stuff?
pot with him.
Oh,
I started doing everything, meth and everything, heroin when I was 14 and just all that stuff really young. But we would smoke pot together. And I don't know, when I found out he was busted, I don't know, I guess I was just kind of numb to it. I didn't really care one way or the other. I didn't realize what it meant, you know. I didn't realize that meant I wouldn't be around him. I wouldn't have the option of seeing him if I needed him, you know. It wasn't until after the fact that I could look back and see what it actually meant, you know.
So if you're smoking dope and doing meth and you said heroin?
Yeah.
So you were mainlining heroin, or?
Mostly I did meth and pot.
Okay.
That was just an occasional thing.
Yeah.
Meth and mushrooms and stuff like that was just occasional. But so my dad was in, you know, the high security prison in Boise, and me and my brother went to visit him, and we were smoking meth the whole way there to go visit him. He was in prison for meth, and we were like doing it the whole way there and the whole way back. It just seems so bizarre now, but my dad had gotten saved before he went to prison.
Really?
Yeah, he went to my grandpa for help after he got busted.
Okay.
And my grandpa had gotten saved like 3 years before this. And so my grandpa led my dad to Christ before the sentencing had even occurred.
Wow.
He was sober for that year before his sentencing and was in different programs and stuff like that. And, you know, you still have to do your time even if you quit.
Sure. Yeah.
Whatever it was you
Yeah,
did.
you don't get that card, you know, get out of jail free card because you come to Christ.
And so while my dad was in prison, he was growing in his relationship with God, and he was sending me letters telling me about the things that he was learning and apologizing for things. And I was still doing drugs. I was reading his letters, but I guess I kind of thought like he just needed something, like a crutch or, you know, something to make it through.
Yeah.
You
He's
know.
going through a religious phase. He's in jail.
Right, and once he gets out, then we'll see, you know. And when I was 16, my brother was in a motorcycle accident. He actually did die. They revived him, my second oldest brother. And yeah, it was really bad. He had broken his leg and his femur and then the two lower bones. He hit the back of a Suburban going, they figured around 80. And yeah, through him, it was amazing. He didn't have a helmet. He didn't have a scratch on his head.
Wow.
It was amazing. And anyways, they revived him. He was in the hospital for a while, and then he ended up getting a staph infection from the, you know, they had to put a metal plate in and everything, and all that tissue had basically died, so they had to like do all this reconstructive surgery. It was horrible, and he had to go through these infusions twice a day to fight off the staph, you know. And so in the middle of all this,
and this time your dad's in prison?
My dad's in prison. I'm living with my mom. My mom was kind of like, even though she'd quit doing drugs, she was still partying a lot, you know, which I couldn't say I was doing it too, you know. But during that time, she had moved in with her boyfriend. And so me and my boyfriend and my brother all lived together. And I was basically the one taking care of him during that time. And I don't know, so that's important for the video. But anyways, so my dad was in Boise, And he put in the paperwork for CWC, and he was praying, he'd been witnessing to us and everything. And somehow that paperwork had gotten through really quickly. Usually it takes a long time for them to prove it, if they even approve it. And he got a transfer to CWC, which is in Idaho Falls.
Which is explained for the people that don't know what the CWC is.
A correctional work center. So if you're behaving and doing everything you're supposed to, then you can get to, it's like a minimum security type of place where you actually get to go work and be a productive member of the community, but still be in jail, And so, anyways, he got transferred to Idaho Falls, and he started coming to Calvary, and then also like Christ Community. It was kind of like back and forth, but I didn't get to see him, very much, obviously.
Because you weren't seeing him at church. You weren't going to church.
Well, I didn't get to see him in prison, so the only time I could see him was at church.
Oh, okay.
That's how I started coming to church.
Oh, I see. Just to see your dad.
Just to see my dad.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel bad if anybody remembers, because I always had like hooker boots on and like ridiculous clothing, like short skirts. And I was like high most of the time that I would come to church. And
Now, we were on Broadway? Or was it here?
I did go once when it was on Broadway, but when my dad got transferred over here, you were already in this building.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I never heard anything you said. I mean, I would like get high and come to church and go home and get high again,
Right.
But I was coming to the Sunday services and also the Pure Word ministry.
Okay.
Which was, it's just God's amazing, how he like orchestrates everything. But between every teacher that I heard here, you and Mike Dodge was teaching at the time, I never heard anything you guys said except for sorcerers will not inherit the kingdom of God. Everything else was just wah, 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 like in one ear and out the other, except sorcerers will not inherit the kingdom of God. And every time you guys would say something like that, my ears would perk up, And I learned that word sorcery comes from, there's like 3 different Greek words that are pharmakia, pharmakan, pharmakeos, the user, seller, and maker of drugs, which I was doing all 3, Yeah.
So you were not only using, you were selling.
And making.
Yeah. Oh, so you had a meth lab.
It wasn't like anything fancy, but it was like a coffee pot and like just a little...
Well, it's a meth lab, right? If it's small.
Basically, it was a small meth lab.
It was a small meth lab. You have Walmart type meth labs, and you have Christa's little coffee pot meth lab. So, large scale, small scale, but because when you are using a lot, you discover it's a pretty cheap way to make it, use it, sell it, make money, function, in that world when you're in that world. Right. And so you're describing things with your dad, there wasn't much relationship prior to him coming to Christ, going to jail, beginning to communicate. Now, obviously, I'll be wanting to have a relationship by having you come to church and see him. But your mom, you weren't real close. Who were you the closest to? Your brother that's just older than you, or where did you? Was there loneliness for your own relationship? Oh, yeah. Describe that, and who'd you latch onto? At this time, you've moved in with a boyfriend's moved into the house, so you've got a relationship going on there, but.
Yeah, so I didn't really have a relationship with with my mom. We would kind of like party together once in a while, but I loved her. I always loved her. We always had like that family love for each other, but it just, I needed parents, Yeah. And by that point I had like dropped out of school. I had tried to kill myself several times. I ended up in behavioral health center. And in fact, that was when I was 13. That was when my parents were still married. That was right before they got divorced. That I'd taken a bunch of pills, and I gathered everything I could, and I counted how many, because I wanted to make sure it would be enough. Sorry.
It's okay.
Thanks. There was like an extreme loneliness. I didn't have friends at school because I wasn't
LDS.
LDS plus that's weird,
Yeah. You're weird.
It was weird. And, it didn't really, me and my brothers didn't really, I think I just annoyed them more than anything, and then my parents were in their own little world, so it really seemed like nobody in the world loved me or liked me or, and that, like, it would just be better if I just wasn't around,
No grandparents, no relationship where you just felt like, man, when I'm here, I feel like I'm accepted and loved. There's just that you felt isolated all along.
Yeah, it wasn't until I started coming to Calvary that I felt like I was home. People here accepted me regardless of what I looked like, regardless of what my life was. It was just like love, It was like a family, instant family.
So, what you said you attempted suicide a couple of times?
Mm-hmm.
So the first time you counted enough pills, you wanted to make sure you could get the job done.
Yeah, that was actually the last time.
That was the last time. So were the earlier attempts, do you think, as you, in retrospect, looking back, it was just a cry for help, does anybody care? Or were you, because there's two different approaches people have, like, I'm dead serious, I'm going to get this done. Or, you know what, I don't think anybody cares. I wonder if anybody cares. I wonder if, I do this if, what was your, looking back, what do you see?
Well, I was just a kid. Like, I was so naive, I didn't realize that if you were going to slit your wrist, that you would have to, like...
Go deep.
It's
like a little cut.
Didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
And I think it started out actually with a fascination of just hurting myself, because then I felt something, And,
with cutting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's how it started, because I would cut designs in my skin, and then I would hide it. I don't think it was really an attention thing, because I would always hide it from people, And
how did it make you feel? You wanted to feel? You felt so numb. You wanted to feel something. You wanted to feel pain, or you wanted to? How long did you cut?
From the time I was 13 to the time I got saved, 18.
18, so about 5 years.
Yeah.
And usually hands?
It was mostly, like, I would cut these grids,
Little designs.
Either like that, or designs, like, around, or like just sit and do it in the same spot, And there's, like, burns, putting cigarettes out, and just heating metal objects up and burning.
Yeah. Just by yourself, and then you'd cover it up with long sleeves, or so it wasn't really... some people display it so that they can get a wow, because they're wanting attention, or they want to feel something.
Yeah, but people think you're crazy when you...
Yeah.
I didn't want people to think us crazy, So, plus...
So, the last time you attempted suicide, you went to behavioral health. And you made sure you counted enough pills. How were you rescued?
I don't know. I don't know if I just didn't take enough. I took 24 antidepressants and 12 sleeping pills. I mean...
You'd think that'd do it.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I hallucinated, and, like, I was sweating, but I was so cold, I was seeing people that weren't really there, and, like, just like, really tripping. And I started feeling sick, and I went and laid down by my mom in her room. She was sitting on her bed, and I remember laying down by her, and I was just shaking, and I just fell asleep, and I just woke up the next day.
In the hospital, or just
I just woke up. Like,
it didn't even have that. It didn't do anything.
It didn't do any. I don't know.
You slept it off.
I guess so. I mean, I just got up and went to school the next day.
So you didn't go to behavioral health that time, was it?
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
Because when I went to school, I had a counselor there that I was meeting with on a regular basis, and I told him about it because I didn't think he would do anything about it. Like, I didn't think that I would end up in BHC.
You thought you could share your story.
But I wanted to talk to somebody because I was starting to scare myself, Like, I was glad that I woke up, and I didn't want to keep, like, being stuck in that, depression. And
how old were you? Because you said you dropped out of school.
13 at this point.
Oh, when you told the counselor. Okay. So you'd move. You're living with your boyfriend. You're living with your mom.
Actually, this is still in Shelley. This is when my parents are still married.
Right, but moving ahead. You're with your mom. You're living with your boyfriend. Your dad gets out. He's in work release. Is it during that time that when you're living with your mom and your boyfriend and your brothers there that your dad's out on work release? When you started coming to Calvary, were you in,
No, that was after my mom had moved in with her boyfriend. By this point in time, I had dropped out of high school.
Okay.
I was 16, just worked and lived in this little trailer. Then my dad got out on work release after my brother's accident, and so that makes sense. Okay.
And so then your dad starts going to church. You start coming to church. All you can hear Dan or me say is sorcerers will not inherit the kingdom of God, which is talking about basically the drugs and that lifestyle, and you're selling, you're using.
And it never had occurred to me that drugs could cost you your soul. Like, that was a shock to me. I didn't see anything wrong with drugs other than it was illegal. And even then, like, it was just like not that big of a deal in my mind, And so to hear that you could lose your soul over something, and it's not like I was having that much fun anyways. Like, I was still depressed. I was still, there was like, when you're addicted like that, there's this dark cloud that is over your head every single minute of the day. Like, even when you're laughing and you're partying and the highlights of it, there's still like this cloud over you, And just, I don't know, the whole, like, just being in bondage to something just sucks.
Yeah. And so you start coming to church, and after hearing that a number of times, how'd things funnel down and to bring Christa to a brokenness to where Jesus touched you by his grace, or you cried out to him, or what were the events leading right up to it? Because there's always, I know in my own life, God just brought me to this crisis. I'm in trouble, what happened?
So by this point, I had surrounded myself by just people that did drugs. If you didn't do drugs, I didn't want to be your friend, didn't want anything to do with you. And then that was just the environment that I had lived in from, between the age of 16 to 18. That's just what life was about, And so I was still going to church. I was still, talking to my dad and everything. And when I was still living with that guy, and a month after I turned 18, I was really getting sick of the addiction and stuff. And I remember in February, I turned 18 in January of 2003. And in February, I remember praying and it was like that sinner's prayer at the end of the service, and just praying like, I don't really want to be this way anymore. I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm not even sure. I mean, I always knew that Jesus was God, but I didn't think he like cared about that stuff, I don't know. Never really had any like clear ideas of who God was, So I got pregnant in the end of February, and so
of 2003.
Of 2003, and so
with the guy you'd been living with for a long time.
With the same guy, and I had been trying to figure out how to deal with this. I mean, my mom was in her own world. My dad was in prison, and I mean, this guy would not even get out of bed till like 12. He'd just be drinking vodka first thing in the morning, and it was just a crazy lifestyle, and I just didn't see any way out of it. I was still smoking pot every day. I'd quit doing meth when I found out I was pregnant, and I quit drinking alcohol because I knew those were two things that would really damage, but I was still taking pills all the time and smoking pot and
like pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, like morphine and hydrocodones and stuff. And I could never picture my life being any different. I dropped out of high school. The most anyone wanted to pay me was like $6.25, I think, and it was just like a pit, and it felt like no matter what I did, I would never be able to get out of it. I didn't want to be living with my boyfriend. I didn't want to be addicted. I didn't want those things anymore, but I didn't see any way to get out of it. My car's on its last leg. I have no education, no job, and then so there's this kid on the way, and I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do with this? I remember just being shocked by it. Like, there's no way you can be pregnant. I thought you had to try. I thought you actually had to be trying to have a baby in order to
really?
get it. I'm not kidding.
Nobody ever taught you anything.
No,
about
like from
things.
the age of 13 to 18, like never using, protection or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It never was a real thought that I could actually get pregnant.
Yeah.
It just blew my mind that I could actually be pregnant without trying.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do with this? And crying and thinking, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I still hadn't cried out to God about it fully yet, And
but you had given it a month before that.
I had prayed to God, but there was nothing. I wasn't following Him. There was nothing in my heart that had actually changed.
Okay.
I just knew that I didn't want to be this way,
Yeah.
And listening to, I was still going to Pure Word and still hearing these things and meeting people that had gotten free of this, And I remember the day that everything changed. I had woken up that morning, smoked pot. I was 5.5 months pregnant. I had taken a pill, and because I was pregnant, I immediately threw it back up.
Morning sickness.
And I dug through my puke to find the pill and take it again. And I remember thinking, my life can't just keep being like this. What kind of a mom, what am I doing to this kid that has no choice of what I'm doing to it, And he had a heartbeat, It was a boy. I mean, there was all these things going through my mind of, he's a real person. He's not just some tissue, and I'm putting him through that. He doesn't have a say in it. And then I'm asking myself, what are you going to do about it? Because, I tried to quit several times. I was on probation for a while. I couldn't even stay sober for probation. It was only 3 months, I think. And I couldn't even, even thinking of going one day without being high all day long, even just thinking of only being able to get high once a day was overwhelming. But to think of not being able to get high at all anymore, I would almost have anxiety attacks about it. And I didn't see any way out of that, So anyways, that was my lowest point. And we went over to Rigby Lake. We were having a little party over there. And I had left the party to come to a barbecue baptism thing that my dad had invited me to.
At the river?
And when I was driving, I was thinking, I was talking to God on the way, and I was shaking. And I remember telling him, I don't want to be this way anymore. And you're the God of the universe. You're the one that created me. And I know you can create a way for things to not be this way anymore. I don't see a way, but you're the God of everything. You can help me. Your word says you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And so, if that's true, then you should be able to help me, And there was a switch that went off in my heart that I cried out to him, genuinely needed his help, and that no matter what happened, from that point on, I was going to follow him. There was a conscious decision and this switch in my heart, And I got to the baptism, I ate and everything, and I got baptized that day. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
It was you and Gordon. Anyways.
Yeah. And you're 5 months pregnant.
5.5 months pregnant, yeah.
Christian. Yeah.
Yep, and then it's all over.
I remember the season you coming to church when you were pregnant. I don't remember the baptism or whatever. But.
And then when it's all over, I get back in my car and drive back to this party where, my boyfriend, I was living with my brother still, and, all our friends just going back into that environment and that cloud again, but there was something that was different. That cloud over my head was gone. And I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to say no, that when I go back into that environment and they offer that to me again, that I wouldn't be able to turn it down. And so I remember just praying the whole way there, God, you got to help me. You're with me, right? I'm not going in this alone, right? And I went to the party and I just kind of kept my distance, and just sat by the water while they were doing their thing. And then we went home that night, and there was all our friends came over, and you sit in your little, it's really like a worship circle where everybody sits around and passes the pipes around and everything. And what am I going to do? I live there.
Yeah.
I have nowhere to go, and I was shaking, and I'm like, God, you're with me, right? Like, I'm so scared that I'm not going to be able to say no. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. I remember I kept saying that over and over, and all things through Christ who strengthens you. And when they passed it around that first time, it just came out, I just said, no, I don't do drugs anymore. I quit. And then, because they're like potheads, they forget and they try to hand it to you again.
It keeps
I'm like,
going around the circle, yeah.
No, really, I quit. They pass it a third time. He's like, try to hand it to me again. I'm like, nope. And then they just quit asking after that.
Yeah.
And that was like my testing, to see if I was really
God with me.
Meant it or not. Because after that, it was like within 2 weeks, all of those friends were gone.
Mm-hmm.
The apartment that I didn't live there anymore, and just everything had changed. Like, it was literally like being in this pit, and God just picked me up and brought me out and set me on level ground again. There was no cravings for it. That's the thing that was amazing. There was no cravings for it. There was like this complete peace. The Bible talks about this peace that surpasses all understanding. All those anxiety, the fears, the depression, it was just gone.
Yeah.
Like that. It was just gone. There was no more like bondage,
Yeah.
And I was 5.5 months pregnant and homeless. My car, like, the transmission was bad, so it wouldn't go out of second gear, so I couldn't go more than 35 miles an hour.
All over town, 30 miles.
Yep.
It would be a slow, long trip to Boise or something, though, wouldn't it?
And it didn't matter. None of that mattered, because I knew that I was saved and I didn't have to deal with that anymore,
Yeah.
I knew no matter what that God was going to be there. I remember reading that it said that he's a husband to the husbandless and a father to the fatherless, and that he would take care of me. He's my provider, he's my strong tower. All those things meant so much right then. It was just like, they talk about like a honeymoon phase, absolutely was. Like, there was just this absolute peace, and I knew that, like, no matter what, things would be fine, I didn't think life would be exactly like perfect or easy after that, but I knew that it would be okay, and the important thing was handled.
Yeah. So how'd you go from being homeless in your car? What happened? How'd the Lord provide for you?
Well, my dad was still in CWC. He had been renting out his house to some friends of our family, and so he actually paid for a room for me to live in his house with them. And so I did that until my dad got out, which wasn't too long after Christian was born.
And you told him, Dad, I gave my life to Christ, and that's how, he was...
He was there.
Oh, okay.
During the baptism, he was there, and I don't really remember the details. I'm sure I told him, I don't do drugs anymore, and like, God changed me,
So you were able to just rent just a specific room, like a bedroom in the house.
Yep.
There in Chile.
Yep, and my brother was really nice. My dad helped me get a new transmission, and...
So... Your dad's changing. He's a Christian. He wants to help you. And what happened in your relationship? Obviously, it changes.
All I know is that, like, after I got saved, the whole world was through new eyes, and the things that my parents had done or the issues in our relationships didn't matter. I just loved them, and me and my dad were able to just come back together, and all those other issues kind of didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, they just went away.
There was like a restoration of that relationship, and so then going forward a little bit, by the time my son was 1 year old, I started going to school, because I knew I'd need to, like, provide, and God kind of been leading me to go to college. And because I dropped out in 9th grade and, like, fried my brain for the next 5 years, I was scared that I'd be too stupid to do anything in college, I couldn't even make it through high school. How was I going to make it through college? And that Bible verse that says that he'll restore the years that the locust is eaten away. I prayed about that a lot, because I was pregnant and had been doing drugs. I just prayed that he would protect him from any damage that I might have done, and that he would just be perfectly healthy and smart, and he is too. He's just a really good kid.
And you named him?
Christian Isaiah. Yeah. And
so you got saved early enough to have a cool Christian name for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you start your new adventure going to school.
Yep. And I remember praying that again, your word says you can restore the years the locust has eaten away. And I, wasted my brain on this stuff and wasted all my time, and I mean, I didn't even take 9th grade math, When I took the placement tests for ISU, I had to take math 15, where they literally the first day of class were teaching you how to count on your fingers. I mean, it was the basic,
Wow.
And I just kept relying on God. I remember praying every single day that I would go to school that He would help me. Just every single day praying that, and He was so faithful too. Like anytime my professors would bring up questions.
So you just finished, you started school and you're praying every day, and 7 years went by, and what'd you just do?
Well, after that first semester, I retook my placement test and tested out of all my other prerequisites and was able to go straight into the normal credits, which saved me 4 classes.
That's good.
That I tested out of. So, 7 years later, I just graduated with 3.87, I think was my GPA. So, I mean, God's been so faithful.
What's your degree? What is it?
My major's fine arts, and I have a minor in computer information systems.
So the Lord answered prayer to get you through?
Yep, He did. He provided financially. He provided the strength to keep going. I mean, there's like a lot of life along the way, and a lot of struggles and everything along the way. But He helped me just push through and just keep my head up and just keep working, Yeah, there was 1 year alone that I got $11,000 in scholarships.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
God was just so faithful, There's like that saying that where God guides, He provides.
Yeah.
And that's so true. He's so faithful that if He wants you to do something, there's going to be a way for it to happen,
Yeah. He's going to work it out.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. That's awesome. So when you think about being touched by God's grace, in just a few sentences, life before Jesus, life now walking with Jesus, how would you describe it to those who are still, maybe they're going to watch this and they're Christa Landon. They're in who you were before, the loneliness, the emptiness, the cloud, the bondage, the addiction. What would you share with them? And then, try to describe in words what life is today.
Well, the Bible says that I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. There's that entire lifestyle. It's just destruction. And it seems hard to ever think that life could be different, but it can. Life doesn't have to be that way. If you're addicted to something or you're in depression or whatever issues you might be dealing with, life doesn't have to be that way. The God of the universe that created everything cares about us individually, even knows every single hair on our heads. He is a big God, and yet He cares about the little details of our lives, And all you have to do is cry out to Him. He's faithful. He'll give you what you need to get out of that, And so what is life like now? I mean, it's not perfect, but there's peace and joy that no matter what comes in your life, whatever happens, that He's there and He's always faithful to us, even when we're not, And I mean, there's nothing better than having that relationship with your Creator. It's like what you were created for, It fulfills something inside of you that no other person can, that nothing can. I mean, people are always grasping for something to fill that, whether it's, drugs or alcohol or relationships or whatever, And God fills that. God fills that better than anything it could,
Yeah. And to have daily, it's so great to wake up and have peace each day and not hungover or have to get high to just get through the day. And, it's just a supernatural thing that you really have to taste and see that the Lord is good. I mean, people can tell you, but until you experience it yourself, you really can't. It's not tangible to you, and so
And the stuff that you do, it doesn't ever just affect you. There's always ripples of it. And
Yeah.
so whether it's a drug and alcohol lifestyle and the ripples of that,
Yeah.
now I get to see with my son, he's growing up knowing the Lord, you know, and it's just going to be cool to see what his generation will be like, you know.
Yeah. To see God work in his life, and that's a real joy for
And
a
I'm
parent.
so grateful that he doesn't have to grow up with a drug mom or, you know.
Growing up in a meth house,
Right.
I mean, you just think about how different his life would be
Right.
that you're learning from.
Right, he knows what love is and he knows who God is.
Yeah. Praise the Lord. Well, thank you for sharing your story about being touched by grace.